The jump serve is one of the most dynamic serves in modern volleyball and is considered an attack-like serve due to the immense power and speed it can generate. The serve is comprised of 4 phases: approach, arm cocking, arm acceleration, and follow-through. Employing this serve involves mastering the explosive spike skill, where the ball is slammed over into the opposing side of the net at high velocities, creating apprehension and high defensive pressure. The goal of the jump serve is to score an ace, which occurs when the served ball is no longer in play, with the opposition neither returning it or touching it. The critical features are variables that contribute to the success of the goal and were established using a deterministic model. These are circled on the slide. Ball velocity relies on the momentum generated in the kinetic chain and is dependent on the 4 phases being performed sequentially and cohesively to ensure coordination and optimization of such. According to Goreb et al. 2016, without ground reaction forces, jump height is restricted due to minimal shift in the center of mass. This demonstrates how elite volleyball players are able to attain 60% of their total jump height by exploiting the center of gravity height at takeoff. The adjustments in the final steps before takeoff to create a wider base of support facilitates the development of vertical force and velocity, whereas shoulder hyperextension accompanied by arm swing and trunk flexion promotes the unfreezing of the shoulder's degrees of freedom and the use of the trunk as a rotational lever for increasing jump height. Ensuring that the elbow remains adducted lowers the moment of inertia to promote accuracy in the ball pass, and additionally reduces the force per unit along the arm, ensuring it is distributed. Camera angles and positioning, lighting, background, and joint marker placement were filming elements considered in order to capture the analysis effectively. As such, the video was recorded as a progressive scan in a dimly lit room with floodlights against a black background. The camera was positioned side-on to the subject and slightly elevated as recommended by Bartlett, 2007. The subject was dressed in all black and reflective markers were placed bilaterally on the shoulder, elbow, wrist, hip, knee, ankle, and various vertebrae positions. This allowed for thorough analysis by accurately measuring joint angles and limb positioning throughout the 4 phases of the serve. The purpose of the joint markers is to contrast the background, obtain the subject's degrees of freedom, as well as assist in reducing time spent digitizing the human body on Canovia. On Canovia, various measurements and calculations were conducted, such as changing the FPS from 30 to 120 as it was filmed in slow motion, and calibrated using a 1-meter ruler to ensure the video was scaled accurately. Optimal positioning of the shoulder at the peak of the approach phase is defined by Wagner, et al. 2009, as having the humerus at the horizontal to or beyond the shoulder, allowing for the greatest arm swing. This is a key mechanism that increases jump height in conjunction with lateral flexion of the trunk. However, poorer trunk flexion inhibits the further extension of the shoulder and limits arm swing. As seen on this slide, the skeletal body is broken down into phases titled 1 to 6, representing the volleyball jump serve. However, in the serve performed by the subject, she only performs phases 4 through to 6. This hinders her ability to be able to produce a successful ace. In image 2, the shoulder begins to flex. However, instead of moving through the anterior-posterior axis, she abducts the shoulder into the mediolateral plane. By abducting the shoulder in this manner, it inhibits the capacity to utilize trunk flexion laterally as a rotational lever and to produce greater jump height. In preparation for ball contact, she hyperflexes the shoulder and at ball contact extends to a flexed position as seen in images 4 and 5. Ideally, the shoulder should maintain extension and adduction for as long as possible to generate the smallest force per unit to the arm. To improve the subject's performance, the recommendation would be to implement shoulder hyperextension by encouraging extension of the shoulder in line with the horizontal. This will promote trunk flexion and will increase the arm swing capacity and further improve ground reaction forces, takeoff velocity, and overall jump height, all of which are currently hindered. Ball velocity is an indicator of force produced by the upper limb and was determined by measuring the distance and time taken from where the ball first leaves contact with the hand to 2 frames after to find initial velocity, and another 2 frames after for peak velocity. According to Patel 2012, elite volleyball players produced spike speeds of over 60 km per hour, which was double the peak velocity of our subjects, which was 31.068 km per hour. Biomechanical, ETAL, 2001 established that with every additional Newton-kilo of force, ball velocity increases by 2 km an hour. The subject's current force output is 40.17 newtons, so the poor ball velocity can be attributed to the poor force output. Without sufficient force, the volleyball cannot be spiked due to a lack of momentum. The current subject produces 517.8 kg-meters per second, with elite players in Patel 2012 producing 833.35 kg-meters per second. Thus, this identifies that the subject requires an improvement in her ball velocity and momentum in order to improve the kinetic chain that will allow for the performance of a successful ace. This can be achieved by implementing a run-up that will catalyze a faster transition between the arm acceleration and ball contact phases that will generate greater force output, momentum, and a smoother kinetic chain, more so than what is currently being ascertained. The depth of the counter-movement jump used to initiate takeoff and ground reaction forces is heavily reliant on the base of support. Insufficient width of the base of support is linked to producing poor joint velocities at the ankle and knee. This negatively affects the extent of which ground reaction forces can produce takeoff velocity. Alexander and Hornish, 2017, determined that a direct relationship exists between the base of support width and jump height, with taking a longer step to create a wider base of support was linked to greater jump heights and takeoff velocities. Ideally, the width of the base of support should exceed shoulder width apart, according to Tillman, Haas, Brunt, and Bennett 2004. Nevertheless, the subject's width of support was determined to be too narrow to obtain optimal jump height. In order to widen the base of support and allow for a more successful ace, the inclusion of a run-up would be most ideal, as it allows for the introduction of braking mechanisms to occur. These are done through deep flexion of the supporting leg and produce high takeoff velocities and jump height, both of which are lacking in the subject's serves. Elbow flexion velocity is the rate of change in the angular position or orientation of the elbow in the arm cocking and arm acceleration phases. The subject performs the first flexion of the elbow in conjunction with the shoulder at approximately 85 degrees, and as the elbow extends to contact the ball, the angle becomes 35 degrees. After ball contact, the elbow further extends to 168 degrees, with elbow flexion becoming almost non-existent. Bund, Gurbani, and Rathjens 2016 highlighted that greater joint angles are directly related to higher velocities of their distal limbs, such as the elbow to the wrist. Optimally achieving an elbow flexion angle of 129 degrees will allow for maximum velocity to be ascertained, demonstrating the subject within an acceptable range for achieving the ace. As the elbow flexion angle was only a few degrees outside of the optimal value, this is considered a strength of the serve, and thus no correction to the performance is made. However, the recommendation made is to ensure that the serve is performed consistently with an accurate elbow flexion angle. In summary, in order for the subject to improve her performance of the ace, she would need to implement shoulder hyperextension and widen the base of support to increase her jump height, include a run-up to generate more force and acceleration for ball velocity, and maintain her current elbow flexion angle, all of which will contribute to the success of her ace.